guys, Anne Marie here, and today we are doing a stamp reorganization, so I hope you'll stick around. Alright, so it's been long overdue. It's time for me to redo my stamps. I haven't super kept up with my system since we moved, and I've just kind of been putting up with it the way it is, but it was way past time. So what we're doing today in this video is I'm going to be going through all of my stamp sets, purging them, recombining them into their new sets. I actually really like my stamp system the way it is. It really just needs to be updated and kind of reorganized, refreshed. So you'll also see me refreshing the materials that I'm using later on, and creating a new spreadsheet and creating new labels. And I'll talk more about that as we go. All right, so first step though is to go through and get rid of all the stamps I don't love. And there's a few. Back when my kids were born, I completely went through every stamp set I owned, broke them down, and then combined them by type. So if a stamp set included borders and images and sentiments, then I pulled out just the borders and put them here. And then I pulled out the images and sorted them by theme. And then I pulled out the sentiments and sorted them by theme. And I don't regret doing that because I didn't have very many sets at that point, especially not quality sets or brands that, really work well within their sets. So it was fine, I think, to do it. It made it much more usable for me, and I got a lot more use out of my stamps that way. But since then, I've purchased a lot of sets that I prefer to keep together. So my storage moving forward is going to be a mix of these pulled apart stamp sets, and I even do, I think, pull apart a couple more stamp sets in this video. And then combined with just regular sets staying together. And then I'm just sorting them by broad theme. And I think that's fine because I'm going to also be making a spreadsheet index that includes every single image and sentiment. I believe that would be a really difficult feat to pull off if I had a very large set of stamps. So to me, it all starts with a really good purge. So if there's any stamps that I don't love, now is the time to get rid of them, regardless if they're in a set, regardless if they've made the cut before. If I haven't used them or if I no longer feel like they're my style, they're going to be put in this little purge pile. All right, so if you've seen my organization videos before, they're usually longer form, and I prefer to let them run, and I just add music to the background, and then I hop on and talk whenever I feel like there's something I need to clarify or point out in the video. But my thought behind this is that you'll grab your own little cleaning project that you need to do in your space, or maybe even just around the house, or whatever it is that we can kind of work on together. I always find it really motivating to put on other people's videos where they're cleaning or reorganizing. It really helps me. I watch it for a while and it inspires me to get started on my own thing. And then it's kind of nice to be working on it together. So I encourage you to go and find a project, just something little that you can work on for the next 40 minutes or so, and we can hang out together. Okay. However, if that is not your jam, I'm also going to include timestamps in the description box below that will jump you to the different parts of the video where I point something out or where I talk about my organizational system. So if you don't want to, clean along with me and wait to hear when I talk, that's totally fine. I get that. So I'll just put those time markers down below, and you can jump to the parts that are interesting to you. All right, here we go. notice that I am pulling out dies as I go. My dies and my stamps are all together, and I prefer it that way because I have some dies that go with stamp sets, and I also, basically categorize them all the same. So my dies are incorporated into my stamp storage, even though it's not 100% exactly similar, because I use magnetic sheets instead of cardstock and mylar, etc. But they are stored together. So I'm going to be adding my dies in later. Right now, I'm just focusing on revamping my stamp storage. And kind of what I'm thinking as I am going through and making this little purge pile, I'm just considering, A, have I used it in the past, 10 years? B, do I still want to use it? Because maybe I haven't. Maybe I had all these fun ideas, but I just never got around to it because it was too much of a hassle or complicated. I'm also considering the quality of the stamp. Some of them obviously have yellowed. If they're real kind of greasy feeling or falling apart or tear when I remove them, they're gone because they're disintegrating. They're not holding up. Another whole reason for this reorganization is that I was finally recently able to afford purchasing mylar to actually store these on, like what you're supposed to use to store them on. Before this, I had been using, like what you're seeing in the picture, is old transparency film from school, because they were, pitching boxes of this old transparency film, and I knew I could use it. So I used it to put my stamps on. But I also knew that that wasn't necessarily good for them. I did a lot of research, and those transparency sheets are made from acetate and not mylar. So they can be like a chemical reaction that causes the stamps to become irreversibly bonded to the sheet. And you're supposed to go off every once in a while and like pull them all off and put them back on. And I don't have time for that. So I was kind of, running a risk here using those materials. But fortunately, for the most part, my stamps were fine. They were just fine. And so if that's all you got, that might be what you have to use. But I will also include a link to the mylar that I purchased that I'm using to store these on now. So some of these you'll see me kind of dither whether or not I should do it. If I dithered too long, I kept it because I figured I obviously didn't want to get rid of it enough. Most of these I was pretty decisive about. There's a couple sets that I kind of set in the middle, just kind of waiting to the end to see if I had duplicates or if I had made a decision basically by the end of the sorting process. Also, you'll see that I'm pulling aside the dividers sometimes, the cardstock that's not going to be used in this next round, and you'll see what I do with that later. This is an example of making sure I don't have duplicates. I have 2 typewritten sets with just little words, and I was really on the fence about that Studio AE set. And so what made the decision for me was that it had words I didn't already have. So since I was on the fence about the rest of it, I figured that was kind of the tipping point. This definitely has stuff I don't have duplicated. For me, a big part of my happiness in crafting is just not being overwhelmed by choices. So I had to be willing to let go of stuff that, I could easily say I'm never getting rid of Studio AE stuff because the quality is so darn amazing. And it is, and that's true. But I did still choose to get rid of at least 1 or 2 of those sets because I just am not using it, or I had it duplicated in other stamps that I liked more. And it's just because that peace of mind and mental space is like more important to me than having absolutely every single thing and having to deal with the storage of all of it. All right, so it was finally time to start pulling these out of their old storage so I can start recombining. And that means any of these sets, I am keeping them on the plastic that they came on, because presumably the manufacturer would put that on plastic that would not damage them. I don't know if that was always the case, but that's what I'm going with. But then the old envelopes, I want to clean, remove the old labels. The old cardstock, I want to recycle or upcycle. And I also want to kind of clean my stamps as I put them back in their new homes. So it's just time to pull everything off. But these are all ones that I am keeping. This was an example of a time where I had maybe some crossover. They both said, feelings versus facts, but I ended up keeping it because the fonts were different, the sizes were different, and I felt like they complemented each other really well. So they're just going to be stored, close to each other in the new system. So one of my big things is trying to be more kind of environmentally conscious in my crafting. There's never a perfect answer here, but that pile of plastic there, it's all going in the bin, and I'm just going to have to be okay with it. I am going to recycle and upcycle the cardstock, so there will be a second life given to that. And I'm reusing my envelopes. I'm not going out and buying brand new envelopes, which, some of these are kind of beat up. And so I think a lot of people, if they were redoing their stamp storage, they would pitch those and buy new ones. But I am going to make the conscious decision to reuse those. And that's kind of the balancing act. It's a line between what's okay for my mental health and my time management and my attention span, and an environmentally conscious or responsible choice. So I feel pretty good about that. I'm reusing the envelopes. I'm going to reuse or recycle the cardstock, and then I am pitching some of the old acetate and the old packaging. And I forgot to mention the stamps that I'm purging, I'm going to be either selling or giving those away as well. At this point, I do start thinking about those categories. For example, I know I'm going to have an outdoors category, and then my floral category breaks off of that. I thought I'd be really organized and be able to know how many sets and or envelopes and or pieces of mylar I needed to prepare. But that is not what happened. I ended up kind of going in circles and redoing things a few times. So I thought I was going to keep track of my categories really well, but I got interrupted too much, or my attention span just could not handle finishing a section that I was on, that type of thing. So it all worked out. I ended up using all of this package of mylar that I have, so I didn't even need to do all of this tracking and counting and mathing that I'm getting ready to do. But whatever, it's part of the process. Enjoy the journey, etc., right? But again, we are down to the stamps that I'm keeping. So what I'm just trying to do is kind of estimate how many sheets of mylar am I going to need. Some of the pieces that I kept from their original packaging, for one reason or another, didn't have the backing sheet anymore. So I was going to need to replace the mylar for that. Some of them were individual stamps that I'd completely broken apart, or, those dollar stamps that they used to have, or whatever, little individual stamps that I had been storing on transparencies and were going to have their own brand new set of mylar. You'll notice as I go that I keep mylar for the bottom and the top of the stamps so that the clear stamps don't adhere themselves to the packaging. I don't need that when I'm storing rubber stamps that are on cling mount. So I'm just kind of guesstimating, and that was kind of what my problem kind of ended up being. Was I should have just gone whole hog and chopped up all the mylar instead of trying to calculate it. But it was kind of interesting to see which categories were really, really overflowing, and which maybe were kind of light. Part of the whole environmentally conscious approach that I'm trying to take here is also reducing my consumerism. So I have enough like journaling stamps, for example, and I have enough floral stamps, at least the layered kind. It helped me see what I have so that I know what not to buy moving forward. All right, so here are the mylar sheets that I have. My Avery L envelopes are about 5x7, so I could have cut these into 5x7, and you can cut 5x7 pieces out of 12x12 materials, but it's kind of complicated. You have to, cut 7 inches at the 5-inch mark and then stop, and then rotate, and then do it again, and then you can get 4 pieces of 5x7. But what I ended up doing for efficiency and sanity's sake, because it was just going to be a lot easier, I just cut them into 4x6 pieces. So I went through first and I cut everything at the 4-inch mark, and I made a big pile of 4x12-inch pieces of mylar. Then I took them and chopped them in half at the 6-inch mark. So I was left with a lot of, I don't even remember how much, but it was around 70-ish, somewhere between 60 and 70 pieces of 4x6 mylar. Most stamp sets are 4x6, so I felt like that was a good size, but as you'll see when I get to the envelopes, it does leave a little space. And so if I had cut them larger, maybe I could have filled the envelopes more, but then I may not have been able to use the mylar as efficiently or as completely as I wanted to, because 5x7 frankly would have been a tight fit on the envelopes, especially since I'm storing 2 sets per. So I feel good about the 4x6. I think it was the right call. right, guys, so coming up, I have a few different videos planned, but for sure I have the rest of my stamp organization. You'll see me actually sorting it into more specific categories as I go and as I decide on what goes where on the mylar sheets, and then breaking those down and making my stamp index and making my labels and all of that. So I'm looking forward to that. I really hope that I see you back here. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. All right, have a great week. Bye.